Welcome to Unclouded. I'm Ashley Brooks.
And I'm Ty Gowan.
And we are your source for the weekly astrological forecast and some cosmic chit chat.
And I'm ready to go.
All right. What do you got for me today, Ty?
Besides the fact that I'm highly caffeinated and just now realizing that as it hits my blood.
That's unusual for you.
Yeah, I know. I think it's because I don't metabolize caffeine well, so you generally don't go for it.
Yeah.
But this tea bag has been sitting in here for a little while.
It's steep and real good.
That is some thick tea in there.
Oh, man. It's like a cauldron brewing.
That's
what it looks like. Yeah.
Yes,
I like that mug a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Raven Quinn, for getting that for me for my birthday. It's a little celestial mug, and I thought that it played out well for our
perfect.
podcast.
Yes.
So one thing I want to ask you about before we get going is one of my favorite days of the year, because I hate winter so much, though I live in Maine, is the summer solstice.
Yes, that's happening this week.
She's coming right up.
She's coming around the mountain.
Do you have any plans? Do you do anything? Like, what do you do on a solstice?
I love to just get outside, spend some time in nature if it's nice out. It's a really great day to like get some flowers or go. I like to go plant shopping around the summer solstice. It's a great day to like light a candle, do a little like meditation or ritual. In the past I've done like little solstice gatherings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, I just enjoy the day because it's the height of summer.
Right.
And I'll never forget an old friend of ours once changed my mind on that a little bit, or infiltrated my sanctum, I would say.
Oh, no.
So I remember being like over your apartment and talking with them. And they were a little bit of a pessimist, but I remember being like, it's the solstice. It's the longest day of the year. It's going to be so bright tonight while we're out. And then our friend just said, yeah, well, it starts shortening tomorrow and winter will be here before you know it. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God. Like,
that's Eeyore.
It's in my head now. And like, I can't purge that. So
it's true though.
I think it makes me more appreciative of the solstice every year, is that this is the furthest away from winter I can get.
Yeah. And that's why I love like May into June, because the daylight's just growing. I mean, I honestly, even though winter, like the cold is awful, the snow is kind of like, but the worst part to me is the darkness. The
darkness. That's what it is for me too, where it's like when it's bright, I'm not asking for it to be bright until 9 o'clock every night.
No, that's excessive.
But like last month when it was like, twilight around 7:30 or 8 when I'm getting tired anyway. Yeah. That's perfect. If we could just stay there.
Let's not like get out of work and have it be dark.
Oh my God. I remember having like not a remote job, but like an office job where I would, you remember this. Yeah. I would go in the dark in the winter and I would leave in the dark.
There's nothing worse.
And they put us in the old computer laboratory where the mainframes used to be in the 80s. So the room didn't have any windows. And I remember that was like the most depressed that I had been.
You have to take vitamin D supplements.
I never saw the sun. Like I'd see it on weekends, it's that. I can't go back to that.
No, that's dreadful.
So support our podcast.
Please do. Keep us in the light.
That's right.
So for those of you who are joining us here for our weekly forecast, we got some good stuff happening this week. As Ty mentioned, it is the summer solstice. Well, in the Northern Hemisphere.
That's right.
We do have a lot of listeners who are in the Southern Hemisphere. I know I have some clients in Australia, and they are going to be starting their winter.
Real bummer for you guys.
Yeah, I know. I wonder how cold it actually gets in Australia. I'll have to ask them, because I feel like it's not as bad as it gets here.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough up here.
Yeah, it gets really cold.
I want to go to Australia so bad
Me
to see
too.
the Southern Cross in the sky.
Oh my God.
Just the
Different
fact of constellations. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take the podcast on the road. We'll go to Australia.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll visit your fans down there.
Yeah, they would love to see us. I've got some that have been with me for a while now. Okay, so this week we're talking about Monday, June 17th through Sunday, June 23rd. And this week starts with a transit on Monday, June 17th. So we have Venus and Mercury entering Cancer, and they're going to be conjunct each other. Do you remember what conjunct means, Ty?
That's the good one.
Yeah, well, it's neutral.
Okay. Doesn't it empower each other?
Well, they give each other their energy. So it's good if it's two good planets. If it's planets that are a little like tricky, then it can be kind of...
What's a tricky planet?
Like Mars or Pluto, like together.
Okay.
That could be a lot.
That's a tricky planet.
So Okay, in ancient astrology, they had what were called benefic planets. So they were planets that offered luck and good fortune. So Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Jupiter.
Jupiter. I've heard
Those are
Jupiter's benefic.
Jupiter's lucky. Jupiter's a lucky planet. So anytime you have a planet in conjunction to Venus or Jupiter, that's going to soften the energy. It's going to make it better. But then you have malefic planets, which were said to create like war or like this is ancient astrology. Keep in mind, like war, disease, like
This is
bad
what I
fortune.
love. I love that ancient
Yes.
astrology.
So you have Mars, you have Saturn, and at times the moon. They were on the fence about the moon.
Because there's the episode title. I'm sorry.
They were on the fence about the moon.
I'm sorry. Oh my God. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So then, of course, they only knew about the existence of Saturn. None of the other planets had been discovered
All right.
beyond Saturn.
Duh, yeah.
So Uranus is considered a chaotic planet. So it kind of borders on neutral. And then Neptune is mostly positive, and Pluto is kind of more negative in its approach. But that really depends on the astrology in particular.
And there's other aspects in modern astrology too. I know we're getting off topic here, but like, what's Chiron? I've heard that before.
Chiron is the wounded healer. So Chiron is a planetoid or like a dwarf planet that's between Saturn and Uranus.
Okay.
So it's kind of the same size as Pluto, and planets or planetoids like Chiron are kind of the reason why Pluto was demoted, because in order to include Pluto as a planet, you would have to include Chiron and other planets like it under the same criteria.
Well, this is an inclusive astrology podcast.
Yeah.
So let's bring those planetoids up and make them real planets on this show.
Okay. Yeah. Chiron.
We love you, Chiron.
Shout out Chiron.
There's our first merch. Shout out Chiron.
Yeah.
It's the shirt. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So Monday, June 17th, we have Venus and Mercury entering Cancer. So Venus moves into Cancer at 2:20 a.m. Eastern Time, and Mercury follows a few hours later at 5:06 a.m. Eastern Time. And they will conjunct at 8:42 a.m., so just a little bit later in the day. And Mercury is going to be in Cancer until July 2nd. So it really only spends 3 weeks in a sign. Mercury is so zippy. Unless it's in retrograde, then it will camp out longer, but it won't be retrograding in Cancer. So Mercury in Cancer is very intuitive, very kind of whimsical. My Mercury is in Cancer. So really good for like hearing tone, kind of like listening in to what somebody really means, like inferring kind of emotional, like thinking about things with your emotions more than like hard, fast logic.
Okay.
So it's going to be helpful for easing into that, being more gentle with your words, kind of phrasing things in ways that will take into account how other people might feel.
Because Mercury, like the Roman god, who is the god of communication.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So how you communicate, and Mercury also rules over like thought processes and logic, because it's like the communication your brain does as well. So then Venus is in Cancer until July 11th. Venus in Cancer is super romantic. That's like the most romantic placement for Venus. So it's really good for being with your family, being with your loved ones, and letting people know how much you care. Very warm-hearted, sentimental, soft planet. But it can be harder to be like alone during this time, or you can feel more like resentful if people around you aren't giving you that love back. So with that conjunction happening on the 17th, there is, I think in the last episode when I teased this, you said something about like quickly falling in love. I think that makes sense because Mercury and Venus are such open-hearted. They're going to be accessing that open-hearted energy in the sign of Cancer. So you could really kind of connect with somebody quickly and feel their energy and just be all about it.
Cool.
So you were spot on with that.
But dangerous.
It could be dangerous. It's not necessarily a negative transit, but it could lead you to just open yourself up.
This is where we talked about listening to your circle. Like, yes.
Yeah. So it's pretty neutral. I mean, this in general, it's neutral, but it depends really more on you and your tendencies. If you're somebody who's known for kind of jumping head into, business partnerships or friendships or relationships and just getting like super codependent, just be aware of those tendencies, within this time over the next couple weeks.
You have to Spice Girls it up, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get with me, you got to get with your friends.
Exactly. If my friends don't approve, maybe there's a reason. If my cat doesn't like you, maybe there's a reason.
Amen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then we have a couple quiet days, and Thursday, June 20th, is when we have our solstice as the sun enters Cancer. Ty, what do you know about Cancer
Crabs.
season? Yeah.
Yep, that's about it. I'm so
Crabs.
sorry. You got
That's
the crabs.
okay. Do you know any Cancers in your life?
Yeah, Grant.
Grant and Carol too.
Carol. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So Cancer is really a great sign. They are a water sign, and they are very emotionally sensitive. They feel things very deeply. They are very loyal. They're one of the most loyal signs. They love to protect their friends and family. When you are in their inner circle, you're going to be there for life. And
Sounds like both those people.
yeah, exactly. And they can at times be a little soft and yielding. They might not always protect themselves with the same veracity that they protect their friends and family.
Carol and Grant, if you're listening, protect yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing about Cancer is they have those claws. They have, the like hard outer shell, but inside it's very soft. So they are very like, they might be all bark, but there's, very little bite under there. They're very sensitive and sweet underneath.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. So Cancer, the sun will be here in Cancer until July 22nd. And as we mentioned at the start of this episode, this is the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and that starts and peaks at 4:50 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday the 20th. And that will be the winter solstice for you all in the Southern Hemisphere. So the solstice is the time when we have the most sunlight here in the Northern Hemisphere. And unfortunately for our friends in the Southern Hemisphere, you currently have the least amount of sunlight. But don't worry, we're going to start giving it back to you day by day.
Yeah. Eat fatty foods about it and watch Netflix. Like, that's how I got through last winter.
Just hibernate. We will be out in the sun for a while. Yeah, it's a really magical time. It's said to be kind of like an energy portal. A lot of that stuff is heightened. So if you are somebody who enjoys connecting with like elementals or nature spirits, it's a good day to get out and do that.
That's right. Our unseen neighbors are ready for the little offerings.
Yeah, exactly. Make a fairy house.
Mm-hmm.
Friday, June 21st, we have Mercury sextile Mars. And that is happening right before the full moon in Capricorn is taking place. So the full moon in Capricorn is happening at 9:07 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, the 21st. So the sun is at 1 degree Cancer and the moon is at 1 degree Capricorn. So Cancer and Capricorn are kind of like the parents of the zodiac. Cancer is associated with the mother and the maternal energy, and Capricorn is associated with the father and paternal energy. So when you have a full moon in this sign, there's the nurturing elements of Cancer up against the kind of like responsibility driven, paternalistic, like you should do this, you should do that energy of Capricorn. So there is like this structure, but there's also this softness. And so at times you might be feeling like your heart is pulling you in a different direction than like what you should be doing or what you ought to be doing. So there's going to be a need to find balance there and to figure out what's going to work best for you. There's also could be some conflicts coming up between wanting to follow your career or wanting to be there for your family. That's a common one.
It sounds really complicated compared to earlier in the week where you're making those fast, impulsive, like, I don't want to say love choices, but feeling choices are overpowering you, where in the end of the week, you really have to be careful about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was kind of like, nothing about Mercury conjunct Venus would by itself make me give that advice, but I was seeing this coming. And I was just like, be careful because you're going to maybe need to think of the bigger picture when this full moon happens.
As a layman in astrology, it made total sense to me. So, yeah.
Good. I'm glad. So yeah, this can be a really helpful full moon for manifesting things around career. But again, you might have to sacrifice certain things like, oh, I'm going to have to be busy, or I might not be able to see my friends as much, or, I might have to travel for work, which means being away from my family. Certain things like that could come up for a lot of people.
Cool. Okay.
So that is what I have for the week. It's not a super jam-packed week, but the few transits that are there are pretty important.
Yeah, they seem impactful for what's going on. I'm glad there's not more than that, I guess, to watch out for. It sounds
exactly.
like a lot.
We have that strawberry moon that's happening because the strawberries are popping off right now.
My God, it sounds like the opposite of a Neil Young song.
Harvest Moon?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Strawberry Moon sounds like the pop hit that like the Beatles might have done.
Right. Yeah. Strawberry Moon forever.
See, and that's what it was. It was already in my head. That's why it sounded like a good idea. Are you ready to move into the topic of the week, Ash?
Oh, I sure am.
Okay, so what do you know about hexes or hex magic or hex signs? They're I know that in Haunt Me, we never really dove into stuff like this, but what would you say it was? Because it was different when I started researching it than what I thought it actually was.
I mean, I'm kind of at a standstill in my brain because I'm trying to determine what the difference between a hex and a curse is.
Right.
Is there one?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's really interesting that hexes and curses aren't synonymous with each other.
Okay.
Let's just dive into it, okay?
Yeah, I'll give you some input as you go.
Sweet. So hexes, hex magic, hex signs, there's specific magical ritualistic practice that has the intent of it is to imbue an image or a certain action with an intent. So
Okay.
that is literally what a hex means. So like it can be used in a bad way and that will lead us to curse, right? But it can also be used in a protective way,
Should
which
be a spell.
spell or a hex sign. And this
Okay.
gets really weird
Oh,
really
like
quick.
in Pennsylvania.
We're getting into it.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. You're
I've
on
seen those. They're like on barns and things in like Amish country.
That's right.
Okay.
Which gets so into another weird type of thing called Pennsylvania Dutch magic. Have you heard of that before?
In passing. I just know because I lived in an old farmhouse that had some of those signs, so I knew a little bit about
That's
that.
amazing. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a direct connection right here. So like the Pennsylvania Dutch magic or the folk practice of it all can totally be another episode. So I'm only going to touch on it.
Yeah,
here.
let's
it's
leave that.
wild. They like literally use the Christian Bible to create new magical practices. I want.
I can't wait to talk about that. We'll have to do that.
So back to hex. The word hex actually comes from the Germanic word hexe or the Dutch word hex, Heks.
Okay.
And both unfairly mean to witch. And it continues to propagate witchcraft in an unfair light right now because that isn't exactly what this is. Like we just talked about, it's not a curse and it's not black magic. A hex sign actually relates specifically to the six-pointed star found on barns that didn't widely become used until 1924 when the book Pennsylvania Beautiful was published by a man named Wallace Knitting, who interviewed Pennsylvania Dutch farmers about their unique barn ornaments and found out that they have magical origins. So exactly what you're talking about.
That's so interesting.
Right, because you'd think that this term would date back to the Dark Ages, and come to find out it is exactly 100 years old, and that's it. And it comes from upstate Pennsylvania.
That's so funny because I have some Dutch lineage when I was doing my genealogy, and I did have some relatives that settled in Pennsylvania. So now I'm curious to look into this.
Yeah, we'll dive in another episode. I'll
Yeah.
make sure that is definitely a topic we do because I think a lot of what hex is misconstrued for is exactly what you were talking about. It has a negative connotation, and in the verb form to be hexed is also basically a synonym to be cursed. You know?
In modern witchcraft practices, I feel like it's used a
So-
lot like that.
Exactly. And I think that's fair. You know, like words change, but where it originally came from, the belief is, you know, pre-Christian, where magical practitioners would create signets. And those signets would generally be made to ward off evil or dark witches. So unfortunately, it's like that good magic kind of got overviewed as all magic is bad. And that's what
the
happened to
worst.
hexes.
Okay.
So, but it does get used with that negative connotation now, and I think that's fair, especially for the use of our mystery star sign today.
Okay.
Are you ready for this one?
Yes.
So the dates that I gave you for the person who is related to hex magic is 6/21/1985, New York City, in 4:47 p.m.
Okay.
Do you know who this person is?
No.
You love this person. So let's run with that and let me know what you found out about their birth chart before I reveal to you who this person is and what they have to do with hex magic.
Okay. So we have ourselves a Cancer here. The sun had just entered Cancer the day that this person was born. So I'm glad that the time seems very specific because otherwise, if it was wrong, we could have like a late degree Gemini. So it's just entered Cancer.
Wow. Okay.
So the sun and Mars are opposite Neptune here. So we have Neptune at 2 degrees Capricorn that's opposing the sun. So usually when you have sun opposite Neptune, it makes for a very imaginative person who's very fantasy oriented, who's usually kind of like head in the clouds, very idealistic. able to kind of connect easily with other worlds.
Okay.
And Mars is also opposite Neptune, which can make for some challenge in like just navigating life and goals. Like you might be a little aimless or like free spirited, but not really like with much of a purpose driving you forward.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. They have a very strong Venus. Their Venus is in Taurus in the 7th house, which makes me think relationships are a big factor in this person's life. Venus is in Taurus, which is one of the natural places for Venus. It's considered at home here, so it makes for a very strong Venus. And similarly to the chart we did in the last episode, the Venus is in a good place, which makes it so that this person is likely very creative, has some sort of outlet with that, possibly like in collaborative ways because of the 7th house placement.
I would say so.
Okay.
And now, is Venus similar because we're only a week later from last year? Like it's in a similar place annually, like how we're in the same place every year?
I mean, to some extent, Venus definitely travels within a couple signs of the sun. So you're always going to have, like, during Cancer season, Venus is always going to be kind of in this zone of the sky.
Okay.
It wouldn't be like across the sky.
Right.
So Venus is squaring Jupiter. And this is going to make for somebody who has a lot of different ideas. They might also have a lot of different relationships. They might be, for instance, they might be known for like marrying a lot of different people or having a lot of different relationships in their life that are significant, or they might date around. But there's also a lot of like creative energy that's just kind of maybe at times hard to like buckle down. Like the energy of this chart feels very much like so many ideas and so many like adventures and dreams, but it's hard to kind of like solidify.
You know what? You know this person better than I ever could, so I'm going to let you reflect on that too once I reveal who they are.
Okay.
Okay, so remember that.
Okay. And then Venus is also squaring the moon, which could make for a lot of sensitivity around the way that they create. Like it's very like probably emotional in its nature. I mean, Mercury is also in Cancer, so there's an emotional quality to how they communicate and how they show who they are to the world.
I would say that's a nailed it.
Okay. They also have a cluster of planets in Cancer. They have the Sun, Mars, and Mercury, very Cancerian energy. Whether or not this person is female, there's like a maternal energy here, just in terms of like being nurturing, being somebody that takes care of others. But again, it's almost like, there's so much, I don't know, a little bit ungrounded energy. So it might be more in like their friend group or their family. Like they're just kind of the person who others look up to or like, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's funny because there's like a lot of interesting placements, but there's nothing like no big aspect pattern like in a couple of the other episodes that we've done. It's like a pretty well-rounded chart. The one thing I do want to mention too is that Pluto is in the 1st house, which usually makes for a very transformative life with a lot of different significant phases.
It seems like it.
That seem like they are very different from the last.
I think the Plutonian energy here is definitely bullseye.
Okay, yeah. So there's definitely like maybe a fascination. I don't know how, this might be a weird thing to say, but a fascination with like death or rebirth.
I was waiting for you to say it.
Okay, I didn't want to like, because depending on who this is, maybe that could be a little disrespectful.
It could be, unless it was part of their aesthetic.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, I think I might have just intuited who this is.
I think you know who it is.
Because I just realized what the sun and moon are, and she says it in one of her songs.
There you go.
I just clicked.
So let's talk about Lizzie Grant. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
The May Jailer.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Sparkle Jump Rope Queen is the other one.
You went deep.
I did go deep. This is Lana Del Rey, one of your favorite recording artists.
Oh my God. Of course it is.
Okay.
I tried not to like, because like when I saw it was 1985, I'm like, this is somebody who could be like, a contemporary of ours, like about the same age. I was trying not to think too hard, but I just saw.
I literally saw your eyes figure it out.
Yeah, she's like
photo comment.
My Cancer is sun, Leo is moon. She has that song. So
that's so great. Like, I love it. I really love that. That's awesome.
She gave us all the clues we needed.
That's right. The context clues were there.
Okay.
So Elizabeth Woolridge Grant, let me try that again. Elizabeth Woolridge Grant, otherwise known as one of your favorite recording artists, Lana Del Rey, is a popular glamour aesthetic for vintage Hollywood recording artist. That's how it was like fully described in when I was reading her bio. And I think that's fair.
That's fair. Yeah, for sure.
So her first single that hit the charts was Video Games. And I can't believe that was all the way back in 2011. Like,
oh my God, I feel so old.
I love that song. And she's been on the Billboard charts with every album released since then.
And oh my God, Born to Die, Pluto.
That's what I was
first house,
thinking.
yeah.
You told me about, what is it, the 27 Club? That there was a lot of recording artists who didn't make it past that in vintage Hollywood, and that was a theme of a lot of her music. That's something I know about from you.
Yeah, she sings about like Jim Morrison and, just she has a lot of that like 60s aesthetic.
And is that part of the Pluto aspect, do you think?
I think so, because it's almost like a fascination with it, but also just wanting to dive into like the shadow. Like her music is very much about like diving into the shadow for sure.
And I do know that is what Pluto represents too.
Yeah, and it's like a pretty exterior, but like a shadowy interior, which makes sense with her chart actually.
Perfect. Stop me if you hear other things that relate. I'm going to dive back into her childhood for a little bit. When she was very young, her family moved from New York City to Lake Placid, where her father became an entrepreneur and her mother was a teacher where she attended school. She also sang in the church choir when she was very young. And then when we were getting into the hardships that you had bumped upon a little bit, it starts around at 15. She gets sent to boarding school to get sober. And that's really hard to swallow, that a 15-year-old was having substance abuse problems,
Yeah, that can be like the Neptune influence, the oppositions to Neptune, like trying to escape. Like that sometimes manifests in substance abuse, like trying to escape from like the daily life in that way. Other people take different paths, but
totally. Yeah. And I think you're right too, because there's a quote in here that I'll read to you, but as a child, Lana's obsession with death and how it contributed to her own anxiety made her feel alienated from her peers who did not share the same concern at 15, right? Because like most people wouldn't be thinking about death.
That's why I love her, because I totally relate.
So when she's quoted saying, "When I was very young, I was sort of floored by the fact that my mother and father and everyone I knew was going to die one day, and I was too. I had some sort of philosophical crisis when I realized this. I couldn't believe that we were all mortal." Which, again, her first album, Born to Die, like maybe that's therapy, like we're kind of talking about,
for sure.
So I think that really hits on what you were talking about in her chart. And it continues. It goes into college when Lana starts releasing her own singles and her EPs under various stage names before she eventually graduated with a degree in philosophy in 2008. At the time, she was also doing a lot of community outreach, which is that mothering aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah, and a lot of her fans call her mother, which I think is a little weird, but like that's a common thing. Like people, like there's videos of people going mother when they see her.
That's so interesting.
Which is really random, but I mean, I don't do that, but we're like the same age. But like a lot of her younger fans will say that.
Mother Lana.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's worse people that you could be looking up to. Seems like such like a great humanitarian.
Yeah, she's done a lot of work, and she's not like very vocal about it. So I think a lot of people don't know that.
I think that's why I was surprised when I was researching her to find out that she literally crossed America on a road trip before she became super famous, where she was helping people in native communities build houses on their reservations.
That's so cool.
She was also working with homeless people and drug addicts to help get them clean. And now that she is a little bit more famous, and like that must be harder to do with anonymity, she's still really working for nonprofits and charities because she focuses these are really important aspects of her life.
Yeah, I remember hearing she was donating profits from her shows to like the small communities she was playing in.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I also love too that she really calls out some of her influences in her own music too. I think that's really, I don't want to say charitable, but very kind, because a lot of people I would say in most fame will claim that they're the first to ever think of something, like
right.
Where she's more like, no, like I get a lot of my inspiration from blues, jazz, and pop. And she named some of her biggest influences from everything from like Nina Simone to Britney Spears. And I love that. You can have that.
I love the contrast of that.
Yeah. So it's, as of reporting this report, recording this podcast. She's had 9 studio albums since 2010, and her 10th is on the way. This September, she'll be releasing an album called Lasso.
Yes, I've heard it's going to be more country themed.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Beyonce's doing it. So
I know, right? I guess it's the time.
I'm here for it.
Yep.
So, Ash, that brings me to the end of my quick little abbreviation of Lana Del Rey's like intense life. What does it have to do with hex magic, though?
I'm not really sure. I know that she's definitely like kind of witchy in her aesthetic. So I don't know exactly, though.
Well, Lana Del Rey is also incredibly critical of our former president, Donald Trump, calling him a narcissistic product of culture and sociopathy, widely to her audience. And I've actually, wild to hear her so vocal and say that.
Yeah, she's not normally so direct in her critique.
Oh, it goes further. She said that in his mental state makes him devoid of any understanding of what his words or actions can lead to.
Wow.
Nailed it. That's my opinion, not the opinion of the podcast. But so anyways, according to a Vanity Fair article I found, in the first year of his presidency, Lana Del Rey took to Twitter to post cryptic instructions for her fans on how they can work together to hex Donald Trump and bind his influence from the world.
When I bind you, Nancy. I bind you, Donald.
That's right. Oh my God. Is that the craft? Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. When she was asked about this, and this is the most Lana line of it all, when asked about this, and if she truly did it, she said, "Yeah, I did it. Why not? I do a lot of shit." And that's Lana Del Rey.
I do a lot of shit.
I loved it. I loved reading this.
God, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I wasn't sure because I know that there's been a lot of weird videos going around TikTok about how she's like a witch and like possessed her crowd. Have you seen that weird video that was going around?
No.
I mean, this is clearly made up, but like a group of people at her like in a crowd at her show fell over, and there was some religious person who said that she had cursed this,
oh my God,
this crowd.
I've seen, but like how hypocritical when I'm watching these mega churches like knock people over with like the blood of Christ, you know?
Right.
I don't know.
I think that, the floor can just get slippery at shows with beer.
And it gets hot.
One person falls, they're all on top of each other,
And we actually saw Lana a couple years ago
that was almost 10 years ago, Ty.
That was 10?
It was 2015.
Oh my God. Well, we got to go back.
Moment of silence for our 20s.
Anyways, yes. So I love her. I'm glad that when I saw her birthday come up, I was like, this is easy. Like, this is an easy hit.
That's great. I'm glad we get to talk about it. That's so funny. I didn't know that. And yeah. Wow.
Oh. Well, that wraps it up for me, Ash. Do you have anything to predict or not predict, but to forecast for next week for people?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about a few things next week. There's going to be a meteor shower happening that's significant.
Oh, sick.
Mercury will be making a couple aspects that we'll discuss, and Saturn retrograde begins. So we're going to talk all about that and what to do to prepare for Saturn retrograde season.
Cool. Well, I look forward to it.
All right. Me too. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back next week.
Awesome. Talk to you guys later. Unclouded Eye stars Ashley Brooks and Ty Gowan and is produced and directed by Nick Nordfors. Music by Ashley Jane Cecilia and Jay Caron. Our community manager is Erin Cross. Art in our videos is by Don Aquarius, and Unclouded Eye is presented by Haunt Me.